So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today to this webinar series where we meet one of the partner organizations of the Combat Antisemitism movement. Right now, our coalition has more than 340 partner organizations, and we have right now today with us Richard Sloan from Stamp It. Hi Richard, how are you doing?
Good morning, how are you, Sasha?
Thank you for being with us. We are live today on Zoom, Facebook, and this webinar will be recorded. So if you cannot watch all of it, it will be recorded. You can go on the Combat Antisemitism movement website and we'll find the full recording of the webinar. I must say that if you have questions, please use the comment section to ask any question that you may have to Richard that is here to answer any one of your questions. For those that never met me, my name is Sasha Rotman-Dratois. I'm the executive director of the Combat Antisemitism movement. So especially today, this webinar is important. When anti-Semitism is on the rise and Holocaust education is declining, initiatives like Stamp It are critical. So we come up with new solutions to educate future generations on our past, so we build a better future for everyone. We usually try to keep these meetings around 20 minutes, but we never succeed because it's interesting to meet people like you, Richard, and I'm sure that will be fascinating to hear your story. I don't want to speak on your behalf and I don't want to take your time. So let's jump right away with you. If you can tell us a little bit to introducing yourself and the vision that you had behind the Stamp It organization, which in my opinion is fantastic. And I'm just waiting to hear everything that you have to say.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very, very much, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure for me and the Stamp It project to partner with Combat Antisemitism. So just to give you a quick background on me and on the Stamp It program, my day job is as an attorney in suburban Washington, D.C. And for the last several years, I've been a religious school educator in synagogues in Montgomery County, Maryland, suburban Washington, D.C. So a few years ago, I came up with the idea, and I'll say off the bat, it's not a completely new or novel idea. More than 20 years ago in Whitwell, Tennessee, a middle school started a project called the Paperclips Project, which many of you have probably heard about. And that was a project to collect 6 million paper clips in an effort to understand the enormity of the destruction and the loss of European Jewry at the hands of the Nazis in the Second World War. And it turned out to be a very successful project, including the creation of a movie in 2004 called Paperclips. So the question is, fast forward to 2017 or so, and why did I start this new Paperclips project, or this new Stamp It project? So several things have happened in the last 20 or so years. First of all, anti-Semitism hasn't gone away. Baseless hatred hasn't gone away in the world. Second, there are today many fewer living witnesses of the Holocaust than there were in the late 1990s. We're probably, my guess is 10 or 15 years away at most from a time where there will be no longer any living Holocaust survivors, any direct witnesses of the atrocities of the show of Nazi terrorism. Third, the Paperclips project sought to collect 6 million paperclips to honor the memory of the victims of the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. Of course, that's essential. That's absolutely critically important. But it only tells part of the story. The Nazis murdered approximately 11 million people, 6 million Jews, and another 5 million non-Jews. And what I decided to do was to identify a project, an opportunity to collect 11 million canceled stamps. And Sasha asked me to bring some canceled stamps today. I have, and so I'll show you what it looks like, to get some understanding as to what 11 million of anything looks like when baseless hatred when intolerance, when anti-Semitism, when xenophobia spins out of control. And so I started this project in 2017 to collect 11 million canceled stamps, and in so doing, send a message to the next generation of leaders about what a social entrepreneurship or an advocacy program can look like to stamp out hatred, to stamp out baseless hatred.
So thank you for that. Do you have a picture so we can see how it looks like? You mentioned about the 11 million that you try to visualize so people can understand. Do you have a picture that we can see how it looks like?
I do. So as with many things, the project started small, and it has snowballed into a larger entity. So I'll tell you, it started off with something like this, where my students would, I would tell them, let's collect stamps as a visual representation of what 11 million of anything looks like. And it started with Ziploc bags filled with a few hundred stamps. And then over time, word spread. And so people started sending me stamps. This is a collection of stamps from Illinois. This is a collection of stamps from Florida. This is a collection of stamps from around the corner from me here in Maryland. This is a collection of stamps from Pennsylvania. And it got bigger and bigger. So this is a collection of 39,000 stamps from a collector in suburban Washington, D.C. I'm delighted to say that now, 4 years plus into this project, we have, with a lot of hard work and through partnerships with organizations like Combat Antisemitism and most notably the American Philatelic Society, we have reached our goal of collecting 11 million stamps.
That's beautiful. So where do you stock all these stamps?
That is an excellent question. That is an excellent question. Many of them are stored in my living room and dining room at the moment. And
what the family thinks about that?
Well, I will say that my teenage children and my mother are not terribly pleased that I have literally hundreds of thousands, more than 1 million stamps in my home at the moment. And so that brings me to the next phase of the Stampede project. I've been a victim of my own success on this project. And so I'm hoping that as the result of this webinar and through other outreach efforts, that we will find a host organization to display the stamps, be it a museum or a library or a university or a government building or some public space to visually depict what 11 million of anything looks like.
That will be fantastic. I hope this webinar will help having the words out and someone will listen to that. I think that you also showed me last time a picture of one of the exhibition that you already did. So maybe we can send that by email. I don't know if you can show it or share it right now with us, but if not, we make sure to send it by email to all the people that watch it so you can see what does an exhibition means. So everyone, can you show something?
Why don't we share that by email? I'll send you a photo of it, but maybe we can include that in the CAM newsletter. I'm happy to do that.
Yes, we'll do that for sure. So I have another question for you, and very interesting. So I understand there is a reason why you choose the cancel stamp, and what is the meaning for you? What they mean for you, these stamps, and why you decide stamps and not something else?
It's an excellent question. So we were looking for a catchy slogan, basically a motto, and we were thinking, okay, some of them have already been selected. For example, as I said, paper clips have already been used, so we weren't going to use that. There was another project in suburban Pittsburgh called the Keeping Tabs Project, where again they collected 6 million pull tabs from soda cans, and they displayed those in a Magen David, in a Jewish star, 6 million of these pull tabs that they placed in a public space in suburban Pittsburgh. Students, my students and I'm teaching 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th graders. We came up with the idea of stamps for a couple reasons. One, because these were lives, the victims of Nazi terrorism these were lives that were stamped out too soon. The victims of the Holocaust, who knows who could have been murdered by them? Possibly a person who could have cured cancer, or a person who could have made massive contributions to society, who were blotted out based on obviously anti-Semitism, obviously baseless hatred, based on xenophobia and general intolerance. We also chose a stamp because we wanted to stamp on positive messages. We wanted to stamp on society's brain, make an imprint of stamping on concepts like tolerance, concepts like inclusion, concepts like fighting against terror, and so a stamp seemed like, and it has proven to be, a meaningful symbol to depict not only the enormity of the destruction, but the importance of stamping on positive messages through this effort. I'll also say, from a practical standpoint, we wanted to choose something that was easily collectible, because when you say, and I'll tell you this, when I introduced this idea to family and friends, I said, okay, we want to collect 11 million of something, and in this case, 11 million canceled postage stamps. And I will tell you, I received some pushback from that. 11 million, it's a big number. Why don't you just collect 100,000? Why don't you only collect 1 million? Isn't that enough of a message? And my response to it was, well, 100,000 or 1 million wasn't enough for the Nazis. They kept going and going and going. And that's why I think it's important to depict, to visually demonstrate exactly how destructive baseless hatred can be.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for doing that. I think that listening to your passion of, you want to do it, this is your project of your life, and it's going to be big, and coming with this crazy idea, let's bring 11 million stamp and make it happen, is fantastic. So you have our support, but also appreciation for what you're doing, because educating about the Holocaust is probably, as you said, one of the most important things in the world today, if you want to have a better world for the future, and especially when we're going to be in a world in 10 years from now, 15, without any Holocaust survivor alive to speak about it, to tell what happened to everyone. When we see Holocaust denial online in crazy places, when we see the new form of anti-Semitism happening everywhere, it is very, very difficult to see that as a third generation of Holocaust survivor, that I can speak with my grandfather today, but one day no one will be able to speak with anybody, and we need to make sure that the future generation will know. So that leads me to my next question. So what do you think is the best and the strongest impact of Stampede over the years by bringing a new way of educating people, of developing this discussion? So what do you feel that you impact the most?
There are, and here to a degree, I feel as if I'm speaking to the choir. Sasha, you're doing incredibly important work, and I thank you for that. And again, I'm honored to be partnering with with you and with the Combat Anti-Semitism movement in educating, in raising awareness. I think that there are many effective ways to accomplish our goals. I think fundamentally, it starts with getting buy-in, with making the message relevant to an audience that might not think it's relevant. I'll offer a quick tangent. I just received in the mail a mailing from the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, and they cite in this message a report from the Pew Research Center titled Jewish Americans in 2020. And here are some of their findings. 75% of the respondents said there's more anti-Semitism now than there was 5 years ago. More than half of the respondents shared that, quote, as a Jewish person in the United States, they felt less safe than in 2015. Next, more than 7 in 10 United States Jews said that they had read about or heard about the following sentiment, quote, the Holocaust did not happen, or its severity has been exaggerated. And 1/3 of United States Jews shared that they recently heard an anti-Semitic trope in their presence recently. So we have a lot of work left to do. It's fantastic that the Paperclips project happened 20 years ago. It's fantastic that the Keeping Tabs project happened in Pittsburgh years ago. But we obviously are not nearly done. And so I think what we need to do is continue educating, continue raising awareness, continue having webinars like this, continue collecting stamps, continue with the same passion and the same enthusiasm that proponents of baseless hatred have to counter those efforts. And I'll say that I'll share just a quick story with you about how to make it relevant to a next generation. I was talking with my students about not only what to collect, we ultimately decided to collect canceled stamps, but also how many to collect. So we said, well, an obvious number is 6 million Jews. But as we said, the Nazis didn't stop there. The Nazis weren't only murdering Jews. They murdered 5 million other people. So we said, okay, we're not going to only collect 6 million, only 6 million. We're going to collect 11 million. But wait a second, are we done there? Was it just 11 million who were the victims of baseless hatred? Of course not. And so here's how you make it relevant and modern. This is the Washington Post. More than 290 dead in a Sri Lanka blast. 49 shot dead in New Zealand, mosques. This is the Wall Street Journal that talked about a shooting at the Poway Synagogue in California. In Washington, D.C., hate crime reports soar as prosecutions plummet. Here's another article about baseless hatred. 2 cities, 13 hours, 29 people shot. 20 people dead in El Paso, Texas. This is from 2019. And so how do we have the most impact? We continue our work. We continue educating. We continue talking about it. We continue to be passionate about it because the headlines haven't stopped. And it's very, very easy, as you can see, headline after headline after headline after headline. It's very easy, unfortunately, to become desensitized to it. Oh, another mass shooting. Oh, really? Another mass shooting? And you can't even catch your breath until tomorrow's newspaper comes out with another front page headline showing another mass shooting, yet another mass shooting, yet another mass shooting. And so the only way, in my judgment, to combat that is to bring the same passion and the same interest in spreading awareness as the perpetrators of these heinous crimes.
Yes, that's I agree with you. I think that I would just add that the Jewish people are suffering not from big headlines, but from small headlines every day. The Jews are victims of harassment in schools, in the streets, in our synagogues, and not just big headlines. This is the difference between other mass shooting and violence. And this is also making the security feeling of the Jewish communities much weaker. And this is very, very, very hard. So as an educator, Richard, and I think that not just as the Stampede founder, but you're an educator in general, what is your expectation from the educational system in the United States, but all educational system across the world to really making sure that the next generation will learn where hatred begins and where it ends? Because we saw how it begins in the 30s and we saw where it ends 15 years later on. So what is your expectation from the educational system to do?
Well, first of all, as unfortunately, as we all know, baseless hatred did not start in the 1930s. It started thousands of years before that. And today, I am, and here I need to thank my educational partners who permit me and permit others and encourage, not only permit, but encourage me and others to talk about this and to teach about it. I'll tell you two quick stories. A few years ago, I was escorting one of my sixth grade classes to a tour of the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And we got off the bus and we were walking up to the entrance of the Holocaust Museum. And one of the parents who was chaperoning us turned to me and said, do you think that our students are ready for this? They had never been to the Holocaust Museum. And I was taken aback by the question. And I immediately responded, of course not. How can anyone be ready for the Holocaust? To be introduced to the work of the Nazis? Who in their right mind could ever be ready for that? But that said, we have to. It's critically important to expose ourselves to that, to understand it, because there is, as we know, there's a great deal of misinformation. There's a great deal of disinformation. There's a great deal now 75 plus years after the end of the Holocaust, there are still Holocaust deniers. Perhaps a growing number of Holocaust deniers. The other story that I wanted to tell you was we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of the vicious murder of 11 at the Eitz Chaim synagogue in suburban Pittsburgh. So I was discussing this with my students shortly after it happened in 2018. And one of my students turned to me, raised his hand, called on him. He said, Mr. Sloan, shouldn't we collect an extra 11 stamps for those victims? And I said, of course we should. This happened in the United States of America in 2018. Victims of baseless hatred, 75 years after the end of World War II. And it's still happening. People walk into synagogues, people walk into mosques, people walk into churches, people walk into schools, into workplaces, and they're murdering people that they don't even know. And why are they murdering them? They're murdering them because of their faith. They're murdering them because of the color of their skin. They're murdering them. They don't even know them. They've never spoken with them. And yet it's happening. Example after example after example after example. And so I think that one of the critical opportunities for the education system is mandatory education, mandatory instruction on these topics, mandatory Holocaust education, mandatory tolerance training, and I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate to have that opportunity with the students that I've had over the last several years. But frankly, it's a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a drop in the bucket. So, Richard, I think that it's not just mandatory until it's mandatory, and I think that there is a lot of advocacy being done to push it in states, on the national level, federal level, everywhere, cities. But there is a personal responsibility of educators that decide to be educators to build a better society, to take the lead, to take personal initiative, to enable Holocaust education, tolerance education, as you said. So I think it's also a call not for mandatory only, but for personal initiative that should come from anyone that is invested in education. So thank you for that. Before we end, I would have two updates. On July 11, we are co-sponsoring a very big demonstration against anti-Semitism in Washington, D.C. So everyone that would like to stand up to hatred are invited. Visit the website nofearrally.org. You're going to have a lot of information there. It's very important to show up, to show unity also in Jewish communities and non-Jews, that we can fight together. Secondly, the next webinar that we're going to have with a partner organization on July 28th with IPSI. I recommend really to come with the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel to learn about how Afro-Americans and Jews can work together, have a similar history, and can be good friends. So before we end, Richard, I will just allow you to have your final words and kind of last call. So anything that you want to say.
Once again, Sasha, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to the work of the Combat Antisemitism movement. Thank you to everyone who has been on this webinar today. I will say this. I will give you my email address. It is richard.l.sloan, S like Sam, L-O-A-N-E, @gmail.com. And I would welcome your partnership. And I say this to anyone watching or anyone who sees this video after today, to join us in this effort, because we need your help. We need your support. There's a lot of work to be done. Unfortunately, I'm hoping for the best, but I'm planning for the worst. My guess is that there will be more headlines in the Washington Post and New York Times and International Herald Tribune and elsewhere about acts of senseless violence. And so we're relying on you to continue to educate, to raise awareness, and frankly to care, to understand that this is literally a matter of life and death, and to get out of our comfortable bubble. It's very easy to say, oh well, okay, there was a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. I don't live in El Paso, Texas. Or there was a terrorist attack in Sri Lanka. I don't live in Sri Lanka. I've never been there. But for us to care about not only acts of violence that happen around the corner from our home or in our state, but in our country and in the world that we live in. I will also say, as Sasha mentioned, that I would love it if we can identify a partner organization from a practical standpoint on the Stamp It project to help us display the stamps, because they're not doing as much good as they can if they're in my dining room or living room. So I would love it if a partner organization, a museum, or some public space that gets some foot traffic to contact me and explore the possibility that we could create a permanent exhibit. Thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you for that, Richard. The call has been sent out right now. We're going to make sure to amplify it when we're going to spread this webinar to more partners and to more organizations. So last word for me, thank you for what you do. And I look forward to continue the collaboration with you, your organization, the great project you're doing. So, and stay strong and stay with the same energy to continue your work. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sasha.
Bye-bye.